Okay, Nick Hutson, thank you for joining us.
That's all right.
First of all, where did your love of theme parks begin?
My love of theme parks began, like every good child of the 80s, with the Renaissance years, I guess you could say, of the British theme park industry. We were talking as we started, but we were talking before we started about John Wardley and how important he is, and I was there, you could say, as were you, Adam. You know, we both grew up with the Chessington effect. I think that's the C word is the big influence for many people in this industry. And I love Chessington. I was too scared to go on the Vampire for many years because the queue line was so, well, it was creepy, wasn't it? And I didn't, but when I got on it, I loved it. And Bubbleworks, the Fifth Dimension, it was an amazing time to be young and go into these parks. And Thorpe Park, of course, was the rival at that time, and the Flying Fish was the highlight of that park until No Way Out came, Colossus, and of course I remember doing that, but that was a bit later. So Chessington really was the park of my youth, and fun fairs. I was a massive fan of fun fairs and ghost trains. I used to build my own ghost trains in my bedroom with my bunk bed, and I used to haunt my bedroom with my teddy bear, and I had a torch that would change colour. It had green, blue and red. It had a little slider thing, and that was, but I was all, I mean, I think we'll touch on this later, I was also massively in love with theatre, and I think I've always said the two are practically inseparable when it comes to creating good theme parks.
As I told you, I am Zach Almighty, and I was sent in here to repair this TV. But would you believe it? There's a gorg in here. Horrible creatures, gorgs, horrible. See for yourselves. Computer.
You know that's the sound of a good episode.
This is the Season Pass. ERT with Nick Hutson.
I'm proud to be a theme park dork.
Yeah, we all are. Let's unite. So for your delectation and delight,
Presented by SeasonPassPodcast.com.
this attraction will have stuff never ever seen before in any park, in any world or galaxy.
And now, straight from London, it's ERT. Now your host, Nick Hutson.
We have to go back even further to coasterradio.com, which for me was the catalyst that set my crazy podcast world going. I was listening, I wanted to listen to a podcast. Podcasting was very, very new. This would have been 2005, 13 years ago, if we can believe that. And I found coasterradio.com and I was hooked, and then they stopped. And I was not heartbroken, but I felt like a massive part of being ripped out of my life, because you become friends with these people that you listen to. I'm happy to say I'm friends with Mike and EB that do the show, but in the interim, I discovered the Season Pass podcast, which is like the serious grown-up brother of Coaster Radio, you could say. And like everything, I'm getting very jaded in my old age. Oh God! And I noticed it's a bit better now, but back then there was no UK coverage at all. There was Theme Park Tourist, which I think Nick, bless his soul, he did a wonderful, wonderful job on that website, and I think the quality's waned a bit. Because it's all clickbait Disney stuff now, but when Nick was around and I wrote some articles, funny enough, I actually wrote an article saying there will never ever be a wooden coaster in this country. I was a bit wrong on that. But then I got in touch with Doug Barnes of the Season Pass, and hey Doug, I barged my way into his podcast, and people seemed to like it, and I made it my kind of goal to cover the UK stuff as best as I can, and I try and put out an ERT whenever I can. It's that's how I found podcasting. Plus my musical theatre podcast, which is Musical Talk, which was a result of Mike from Coaster Radio helping me set it up. So I like to say I was there at the beginning of the podcast because, you know, everyone, no offense, everyone has a YouTube channel now. Everyone does a podcast now. Hello, Moss. And it's not new anymore, but if you do it right, it's still the best thing you can do to express your passion about something, and B, get known in the industry. No, yes, my specialist subject is and always was musical theatre, so I want to still write musicals. It's a dream to write a hit show and live off that for the rest of your life. But I always wanted to. I always loved theme parks, and I thought, well, season pass started interviewing composers of theme parks, and no one ever really thinks, oh, someone sits down and does this. And I really started to be interested in it, and I just sort of decided to try and get into that because it means that people are going to hear your music, whether they like it or not, which is lovely. But musical theatre has always been my main love, and it probably helps knowing that because you're telling stories through music, which is what we're doing. So Musical Talk was going strong, and a friend of mine in Mexico, well, he wasn't a friend at the time, he was a listener who was interacting with us a lot, started doing interviews for us because he knew people like Millicent Martin and things when he went over to America, so he did that. Dominic McChesney, who's now left Sudden Impact, he suggested that I write a trial piece of music for an attraction they were doing in Malaysia, for a Cleopatra walkthrough attraction. To be honest, I never heard of Lynton v Harris and Sudden Impact, but for those of you who don't know, Lynton is somewhat of a UK scare legend and somewhat of a worldwide scare legend. He did the Freezer at Thorpe Park, he did Terror of the Towers at Alton Towers, he did the original Madame Tussauds scare maze, he did Madison Scare Gardens, he's done hundreds and Tomb Raider and things in Australia, and big immersive actor-led walkthrough attractions, which is stuff I love. So I started chatting with Dom, and we got to the point where I was able to do a thing for their attraction of Cleopatra, which I did, and it went well. I don't know if the attraction is still there in Malaysia. This was at Sunway Lagoon, which is an amazing park because the town own this park, so it's massive, and it looks really, really fun. I'd love to get out there one day. The world's first Ghostbuster attraction. I know we had the show at Universal, which I saw when I was 8 years old, and you'll never forget that amazing, what was effectively a magic show with these Pepper's Ghost illusions. But Lynton had got the rights to do a Ghostbusters attraction, and this was in Mexico, Six Flags Mexico, of all places, which is brilliant. And I worked with Dom very, very closely on the music. I think it came up with 28 drafts. And this is effectively a laser tag attraction, you get given proton packs, laser guns, and you're split into two, and you have to fight each other.
Ghostbusters, what do you want?
Very, very fun attraction. The music was interesting because they wanted it to get quicker as you play the game. There are 5 minutes in the arena, and they wanted they wanted the pace to pick up, which is interesting to do in music, because if you have, and then it's really jarring. So we had to build and build and build and build. And actually Mike from Coastal Radio, who does a wonderful Tully impression, lent us his voice. So it all goes back to Mike. He lent us the voice of Tully. So he's doing the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 at the end of the countdown, which was good fun. The music, it's been so long since I've listened to it or looked at it. It's zany, silly, quite 80s, because you want to stay within that kind of Ghostbusters world, but not synthy. The fun bit that I came up with Dom and Lynton was the queue for the attraction is a Ghostbusters museum. So I thought let's put a Muzak bit into this queue to give it a bit of comedy. So it's kind of elevator lift, is that a term? Elevator music feel. And Lynton says it's his funniest thing he's ever heard. It just makes him laugh, which is brilliant. And the Ghostbusters, I think the main thing is kind of that, and then it goes at some point, what does it do? What key are we in? It's kind of that zany feel. I must have been influenced by the vampire music, because I think the opening starts. There's kind of big gothic chords. I love the third one. It had some really quite scary moments in it. But you've got to have that element. Everything I do has to have an element of creepy in it.
Be careful where you tread. Be careful where you go. Be careful of the presence of little Molly Crow.
They're all brilliant at Alton Towers. The thing is, Molly Crow took longer to do than Subspecies. Subspecies, I think, will always be the thing I'm known for, and that was a little side project for me compared to Molly Crow. Molly Crow is where the detail went. Subspecies was just kind of just noise all over the place. But Subspecies has an interesting. I made some notes, literally. Subspecies has an interesting, a little Easter egg. So music, there's something called the Devil's Interval, which is something I use a lot in scary music, which is, this is a fourth, this is a fifth, and then there's something in between, which is called a tritone, which is, you may recognize, which is Maria from West Side Story, or so it's used a lot in music to make it sound odd. But I use this. Which is, if you know Subspecies, you'll recognise that. But then I put this in. Which, if we invert that, becomes Nemesis, Nemesis music. So I took that and put it on its head, literally. And no one notices that, but it's great because it gives me a bouncing board of ideas. I didn't want to quote, I think my original demo literally started, and we couldn't use that because it's not Nemesis, it's part of the Nemesis brand. What was the question again? Sorry, I got carried away. The poem was my idea because we had, and that to me says it needs, it's not a song, but it needs, you know, Molly's in her cot now, crying can be heard. So I just scribbled it down and sent it to Pete, and he went, yeah, and we came up with an idea as to why it would be sung. The piano is great, but my box of tricks is the sounds. Everything, you know, you create a world with the sounds, and Subspecies was industrial, you know, 9 Inch Nails, rocky, guitar-y, and you just go from there. You just play around with ideas. As I said at the beginning, it's a lot of back and forth, a lot of collaboration. Pete was great because he's such a perfectionist, and the finale for the Molly Crow, the music for the Molly Crow finale took, I think, over 30 drafts to get right, and we were still putting it in the second day the attraction was open. We were still making changes, and that finale was amazing because it was such a surprise to take those hoods off and be in this beautiful Victorian bedroom. You don't really you don't think about it because you're so, you don't get bored with what you're writing, but you get so, there's no connection to it at all. The only time I felt connected to it when I was hearing it in the park, and I was scared, because Subspecies is bloody terrifying. When you're on your own in that blackout room, and I remember saying to Pete, if I had not done the music for this attraction, I would not go into Subspecies, because did you do it the first year? It was intense, wasn't it? I mean, it really was. And yeah, we laugh about Darth Vader being it, but that was just, it's a gas mask, it's not Darth Vader. It is Darth Vader. It's great. For a composer, it's the best feeling in the world to stand back and just watch people. For me, the Main Street, but not Main Street, for me, Tower Street was the best thing because I said to Pete, can I do a piece of music for Tower Street? Yeah, so I did this thing, Trickle Tower Street, I called it, and people loved it, and I literally saw a little girl dancing down Tower Street to it, probably your kid, which was nice, but just to be able to use, if I can play it properly, it's such a wonderful tune. I think it gets overused a bit much now at Towers. I think there are probably clever ways you could use it, but I think that's kind of what I can play of the Towers Street thing because it's been so long. Yeah, and I like using voice a lot in work. So I think that's why Molly Crow, I wanted to, because it really helps tell a story, because otherwise it's just music and you're thinking, why is this playing? And I've talked about this in other chats. It's what's called the diagenesis of audio, whether the audio has a source or it doesn't have a source. So if it's a radio, how can we use this to tell the story, or are we just hearing this music coming from nowhere? So I always like to say, why is the music playing and how can it tell the story? So I think that's why the poem exists in Molly CROWE. I prefer Fright Nights because it's nearer. I like Scarefest for the atmosphere. I don't think anywhere in the world matches those massive Gothic towers. It's difficult to compare them because I have a very obvious close relationship with Scarefest, so my heart will always be at Scarefest. It's changed over the years. I know more actors at the Thorpe Park side, but I know some actors at Towers. The highlight for me actually was House of Monsters. I thought that was a really almost midway level. You know, that could be plonked down in County Hall permanently, that attraction, and that really was wonderful. I like the welcoming. Wasn't scary. I just love the theatricality of it. Subspecies, I think, done well. It can be, hands down, one of the greatest experiences you can have in a scare maze because it's so unlike anything I think we've ever seen in a major corporate environment. When I tell American friends who are used to Universal's boo, boo, boo style of scares, they just said, how the hell can that be allowed? And I said, well, it's what we do, I think.
Do you think the British have a bit of a different take on these scare attractions than the American?
Yeah, I think the crowds, you know, America has such massive crowds of people. I was at Universal Hollywood for Halloween a couple of years ago, and you're talking 3-hour queues for, you know, a 2-minute maze where it's endless people going in. Can you imagine how they do it, what it'd be like if it was batched? Therefore, I think we offer a lot more intimate experiences. I think we do that very well. Focused scares. Some people argue that you need to have the actors doing the same choreographed scares every 3 seconds to give everyone the best experience. I'm ambivalent on the subject because I'm not an actor, but I think we do focused and intense scares. But then America has things like McCaney Manor, and you say, well, that would never be allowed here, and who'd want that? Yeah. I wanted a more permanent thing with Chessington, so they very kindly gave me Pandemonium, and it sounded like a wonderful idea for a show. So I got the script, read the script, came up with a couple of cues, and I literally just hand it over to them and they do whatever they want with them. I've done my job, and then I saw the show and it was great, and then I saw it again and it changed and it was great as well. The pandas are beautiful. I mean, they really do. You do think they're real, and they are real. The music for Pandemonium, it's adventure-y, mystical, and then I did that, and that was that. Then I did the Christmas version, which was really, really nice indeed, to go back and kind of use the same tune, which is... That's it, that's the leitmotif. Interestingly, it's a variation on that, which is Chessington's whether you know that or not, that is Chessington's tune, the Hall of the Mountain stub, if you will. So with what became Dragon Falls and what is Pandemonium, I littered that, my version and their version, in throughout the whole score. And whether you notice it or not, it's there, and it's musical theatre in me, dear. The biggest gig of my life was last summer for their... Well, first of all, I started off with Doll Land, which was a lovely... I'm a massive Roald Dahl fan. So to be able to bring Roald Dahl's weird world to life, I'm a massive fan of Matilda the musical and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and just to be able to do my own little official Roald Dahl music was really, really nice. But the fireworks came next, and Phil at Oakwood, who's brilliant, really, really passionate guy, and understands the importance of music, he said, "You're going to do fireworks, Nick?" So, okay, fine. And they loved it, and I still think the greatest thing personally that I've ever done for the theme park industry. I mean, I know Subspecies is iconic, but for me as a composer, this piece of music, because it was so difficult, the result was so epic for me personally. Now, there's a big sweeping moment in it, which wasn't in one of the original demos, and my friend said, it needs a big tune, and I thought, well, I can't. He said, go away and write a big tune. Well, no, I need inspiration. So I think there's a saying, great composers do, or good composers do, great composers steal. So for me, my most favourite bit of music of all time, it's by Gustav Holst, who's a composer, and he wrote a suite of music called The Planets, which in itself has a piece called Jupiter, which in itself has a very sweeping, slow movement. We all know that tune. It's played with an orchestra, it's absolutely beautiful. Da, 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 da. Played well, it's brilliant. So I listened to that and I did my own piece sort of inspired by that tune. Very simple, but you can hear that's straight up Holst, and that for me was the turning point with that piece of music. I was able to give it the breadth it needed, and I love it. And you bring up a good point. I mean, one of the first things I learned with Ghostbusters, and then used it a lot for scare attractions, is the difference between ambient music and something with a tune. Because I grew up with hymns and listened to classical music, I'm very much in the everything needs a tune world. So the first thing I did for Ghostbusters had a tune. And people that Dominic told me when they went into the arena to start practicing, when they first heard the music, everyone started dancing, which is great, but you don't want the music to take people away from the experience, which is why a lot of a lot of theme park music is quite unmelodic. It's just kind of, chugs along. And then you put a tune in people recognise. So, it's quite good that. So it's why a lot of it is kind of ambient. For scary. You want to set the mood immediately, and also you've got to think, there's another thing I learned was there's no beginning, middle or end to these pieces of music that are, you know, on a loop, because you don't know when the guests are going to come in. That's why the fireworks was great, because it was a real piece of music with, you know, arcs and builds and all that kind of rubbish. It is the most vital piece of music for any theme park, because it's like the poster for a film, or the opening credits for a film, or the first 5 seconds of a pop song. Because if you're not grabbed by the first 5 seconds, you turn it off, don't you? Especially nowadays when we have accessibility to all sorts of media so quickly. Parks are different because you've chosen to be there, so you pay to be there. So it breaks my heart when parks play pop music upon entering, because it shows they're not really bothered, and it shows they're not separating themselves from the real world. You don't go to a theme park to listen to Katy Perry. Unless she were to do something original for the park, but that's a different story. So yes, entrance music is really, really important. And it's what you remember. I mean, the Alton Towers entrance music originally was brilliant. You know, it quoted old English folk tunes, and it as opposed to just the Hall of the Mountain King, it really set the mood, and it had all the music from the various lands blended in really, really well. And I like what Thorpe Park have now done is they have exit music, and they have entrance music, and they have music for different types of day in all the lands, and they're using the motifs of all the rides, and it's all coming together. Yeah. The ice cream farm is an attraction in Cheshire. I haven't been there, but they...
Obviously I now need to go.
Yeah, well, I think it's perfect for because you have your kid, and it's really a kind of... I don't think there's an entrance price, you just pay what you want to do. And it was great because it's got mini golf, it's got diggers, you can just dig sand. It's got the world's largest ice cream parlour, which is a USP in itself, I think. And they got in touch and said, we're interested in some music. So they gave me a couple of lands to do, and I did it. It's sweet and fun. I'd love to go there and just have tons of ice cream ready. We'll go in the summer and see what it's like. I did one for the Sea Life in Paris, which is lovely. It's actually on Disney property, which is hilarious, at Marne de Vallée. And haven't been, but they wanted something for their penguin experience, which opened last year, in 2017. And aquariums are difficult, because I've also done something recently for the Bristol Aquarium, which is a radio jingle and some lobby music. It's all the kind of, it's hard to say on a piano, but it's very kind of, very wishy-washy, Enya kind of. So it's difficult to do 10 minutes of that. The Penguins thing sounded really great because it was an experience. So it starts off with an actor telling you about to go on this Arctic exhibition. So we started off with a stripped down version, the main theme in the room. So you had a very bare version of the tune, playing with the actor scene. So when you walk through the tunnel, which was just wind and magical chimey bells, when you got to the final room, you had the same tune playing but with a much bigger feeling. And I think they put it in the show control software that both pieces of music started exactly the same time. So it's the same track, but it just grows. Wherever you are in the track, it will grow into a much bigger version than itself. I'm going to Paris next month, so I might try and check it out. Who knows? I mean, I know, but I can't really say much. It's always a problem with this industry, is you can't really tell anyone anything about what you do. Yeah, there's a couple of things in the pipeline, but if you are thinking of getting into this industry or any creative industry, the caveat I will add is that it's a lot of waiting. It's a lot of, not battling, but it's a lot of, I'm learning so much still about this industry when it comes to how to create things, but also how to sell yourself, what to say, when to say it, how to say it. It's 80% of the job is not working, which is really annoying because you really want to be doing stuff. And I wish I could tell you what I have planned, but 50% I don't know, 50% I can't say. I'd like to do more shows because obviously that's where my training lies, and I'd like to be really part of the music has to do this at this point, and then it has to go here, and then the lights have to go off, because that's what I see. But sometimes in the creative world you just can't. You just got to hand it over and see what happens to it, which is also quite fun, because I don't know how they're going to use some of my tracks, and you think, oh, I didn't really think of that there. That works quite well.